In the movie Barbarian, a woman books an Airbnb only to discover there's another man already inside the house. He claims that he is just as surprised as she is, as he just booked it on a different app and for some reason it is now double booked.
This is 476 Barbary, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so.
You don't know?
No, I don't live here. I'm renting this place. It's the middle of the night. I don't have it top of my head, the address.
No, I'm renting this place.
And just like that, we have our mystery. We know the movie is called Barbarian. We know that there's probably going to be a killer given it's a horror movie. So who is the killer? Who is the barbarian? It's always hard to pull off a twist in a mystery, right? You set up the mystery, but there's kind of a saying in screenwriting as to how a twist should be. It's called surprising but inevitable, where when you set up a question, the answer should be surprising but inevitable, which on face value seems to be a very difficult thing to pull off. How do you get something to surprise an audience, but also get the audience to say, well, yeah, it makes sense that it happened that way? Well, this movie does, I think, a great job at delivering on surprising but inevitable, and it does some really subtle things to make it work, so that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. So right here is the central question. Is Keith a killer, yes or no? And we're watching the movie along with it, so we're obviously playing along, and I should mention this should be obvious, but there will be spoilers for Barbarian, at least for the first 40 minutes or so. So if you haven't seen it, it's on HBO Max, check it out, and then come back to this video. So is Keith the killer? Well, what is some evidence for him being a killer? For one, he's acting weird, which is definitely, I think, valid evidence for somebody being a killer in a horror movie.
Would you mind pulling up your reservation confirmation just so I can see it?
In case I'm some kind of weirdo who's broken in here to sleep. Yeah. No, it's fine. No, let me just find my phone.
This isn't something that if it happened in the real world, you'd be immediately saying, oh, that guy's a murderer. But again, we know it's a horror movie, so that's evidence to point us in that direction. There's also the obvious, we just know that there is a killer. So that's bullet point 2 pointing towards Keith. If Keith's not the killer, it would have to be coming from a completely different person that we have not met yet. We only have met 2 characters for the most part outside of someone at Tess's work who we meet a little bit later on in the movie, but before the reveal. So it seems like that is a point in the favor of Keith being a killer. So okay, it's pointing towards Keith being a killer, but what are some of the things in the no column? Well, for one, evidence. I mean, evidence points to actual real world evidence points towards Keith not being the killer. I'm not talking about movie evidence, because movie evidence is very different than real world evidence, but there's some real world evidence to support Keith not being a killer. Like in this scene, when Tess is in the bathroom, she goes through his toiletries and sees there's travel-sized toiletries. She sees a toothbrush plugged in an awkward spot, and she also sees more travel-sized shampoo, which is evidence to believe that he is legitimately telling the truth and is traveling here. If there was a big bottle of shampoo, it'd be a bit more concerning because maybe he lives here. Also, when they go over the details of the Airbnb, this happens.
Here's the thing.
Right. Yep, that looks right to me. Great.
Maybe I have a different number. Threw home away than the one that you called. This is what I got. 303
303 509.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Well, that might be enough if you're living in the real world to believe that he is not a murderer in a movie where you know it's a horror movie. That's still not quite evidence enough to get you to fully believe it, but it is a point in the Keith not being a killer column. Also, he's being nice, right? That's evidence he's not a killer. Well, is it? I actually would argue it ends up being movie evidence of the other way around. Like, let's take this scene, for example, where Keith offers Tess a drink, and Tess says the following.
Just saying.
I'm okay.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna have some tea. I'll just make you a cup.
That's definitely inappropriate behavior, right? She said she does not want a drink, and he is making her a cup anyway. That's not something you should be doing, but it's possible he's doing it because he's being overly nice given the awkward situation. But again, it's a movie. You know there's a killer. You know which direction it's pointing you towards. And actually, the writer and director of this movie, Cregger, has talked about in interviews how he got this idea from actually a book where it was talking about how women will notice these red flags that men will give off, and he basically just loaded this, the first part of this movie with a bunch of those red flags. Something like, even after denying a favor, the man's still giving you that favor, or something like this next scene.
I thought you wouldn't want any if you didn't see me open it, so I waited.
On face value, maybe you could argue it's not that creepy, but again, if you actually think about what he said, he essentially, the subtext here is he was saying, I was worried you might think I would poison you, so I made sure that I waited before opening the bottle, so I'm not going to roofie you, or something like that, which is definitely weird, even though it's under the guise of actually him trying to be nice. So back to our chart, I'm going to put he's being nice actually in the is Keith the killer? Yes category, because that's how, when you're watching the movie, you believe it is pointing. So we have Keith being a killer. Why is Keith potentially being a killer? Well, because he's acting weird. We know there's a killer. He's being nice, so he's trying to get something out of Tess, it seems, even if it's just a relationship potentially, or just a friendship. There's definitely, reason to believe that would make him more likely to be a killer in the horror movie than less likely. And the, cherry on top of this sundae, I would say, he's Bill Skarsgård, right? The casting itself makes you believe there's a very good chance he could potentially be a killer. The only real thing that we have in the no category is evidence, which is perfectly why this twist works so well. This movie subtly puts your brain in position to where every single box that you have checked is in the yes category, but with nothing being obviously in the yes category. If Keith came home with a giant axe that was covered in blood, that would be in the yes category, but it would be so obvious it'd probably put your brain into the no category. Sometimes things like being nice can actually make you believe that someone would be a killer when it's a movie. It's just really smart writing. So then when the twist finally does happen and it turns out that he is not the killer and there is a different killer hiding in the basement, and that is the true Barbarian, although the true Barbarian is someone else, it gets a little bit, a bit more detailed later on in the movie. You're surprised because subconsciously and consciously you were definitely led to believe that Keith was the killer. However, all of the evidence still pointed towards him not being the killer, which means that it was surprising, but still inevitable. At least that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.